Hey, this is Brian.
And Shelby.
Hey guys, this is Matt.
Hey, this is Tristan.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Robin Vogt from the BrickCityBlockade.com podcast network.
And you're listening to the
Hyperspace
PodBlast.
Aren't you a little short for a podcast?
Huh?
Hey guys, welcome back to Hyperspace PodBlast. We're doing the RFFF today, and we have a very special guest with us. Hi there, sir. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How you doing? I always wanted to do a voice on your podcast.
Right on, man. So if you're a long-time listener, first-time caller, no, just kidding. You might recognize Matt from our collecting episode a long time ago. But we're not talking about collecting today. We're talking about Final Fantasy.
And Star Wars.
Yay! So let's jump right in here. Why, Matthew, do you love Final Fantasy? And how does it compare to your love of Star Wars?
Well, I'd say it probably is the collecting is what really connects the two. I started collecting Star Wars figures the same time I started collecting Final Fantasy stuff, and that was actually your fault. I don't know if you know that or not. You actually bought me the Final Fantasy VIII Guardian Force figures for my birthday when we were in high school, or when I was in high school, and that kind of kicked it off. But that was also around when Episode 1 came out, and that's when I started collecting Star Wars figures. So that's kind of how they're connected. As far as like why I love it so much is probably because I started with Final Fantasy VIII, and it was right around the time of my life, again in high school, where I hadn't really played many video games in a long time, because I was like, oh, video games are for kids. And I finally started playing PlayStation, and I played Final Fantasy VIII, and I didn't realize like how amazing video games could be, because there's this huge story and all these characters. And, you know, I just got sucked into it and played it for like 120 some hours. And then just looked forward to every Final Fantasy game that came out since then.
He would sit cross-legged on the chair with the strategy guide in his lap to make sure he didn't miss a single thing.
Yeah, exactly. With
also,
my
didn't know about
Squall Leonhardt action figure on the side of the chair there.
True. I did not remember being the person who got you into collecting.
Yeah, you bought him on the dial-up internet.
So, Matt, take 3 characters from Final Fantasy. Who would they be in Star Wars?
All right, so first off, I'm going to say I'm not going to use Final Fantasy 12, because if you go online and look, there's like 1,000 articles about how Final Fantasy 12 is a ripoff of Star Wars, so that's too easy.
Okay. So,
I'm not going to do that one, but I would say Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, I feel like, is a similar character to Luke, especially in the original trilogy. Irvine from Final Fantasy VIII, I feel like is kind of a Han character, especially with he's got a shotgun, so he's like the gun user in that game. And then Auron in Final Fantasy X, I feel like is like an Obi-Wan. In Final Fantasy X, he's kind of like the guy that knows everything and helps this younger guy who doesn't know what's going on, Tidus. And he kind of shows him, you know, the world and teaches him about all kinds of interesting things.
Does he teach him about Blitzball?
No, he doesn't. He already knows Blitzball.
Oh, okay.
That's like the only thing he knows. You remember that too, don't you?
I do. I have fond memories of mostly watching you play these games, to be honest.
Playing Blitzball on Christmas vacation.
Yep. I did play 7, which is the best one. Just saying.
I can appreciate that.
All right, so if you could take one person from the Final Fantasy universe and put them into Star Wars somewhere, who would it be and where would you put them?
All right, so I thought a long time about this, and I think Steiner from Final Fantasy IX, I think you could pick him up right out of that game and put him right into Battlefront 2, and he'd be an awesome Iden Versio. So he could start out with the Empire and kind of, you know, spoilers, go join the rebellion, because that's similar to what happens in the game, where he starts out, he's just a knight, and he's protecting the queen and the princess, and then kind of realizes, like, hey, this isn't so as much as it's cracked up to be. Only he's way goofier than Iden, though. Of course,
nothing wrong with Goofy.
Look up a picture of Steiner from Final Fantasy IX when you get a chance. He's pretty goofy looking.
And vice versa.
I think it would be really interesting to have Yoda in Final Fantasy VIII as like one of the teachers in Balam Garden. Just because I think the idea of Yoda with a lightsaber and using the Force with a bunch of kids, like using magic, fighting a T-Rex, sounds really cool.
Yeah, I'm into that. I would also like to see Yoda ride a chocobo.
Oh yeah, you know he'd be down for that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. All right, now for the big money question.
Why do you always call it that?
I don't know. Ship one character from Final Fantasy and one character from Star Wars. What would that relationship be like?
So I'm gonna say Yuffie.
Big money. No whammy.
Stop it, Brian. I'm trying to listen to Matt.
I would say Yuffie from Final Fantasy VII, and then Ezra from Rebels, because I think they would have an interesting relationship, especially with Yuffie being kind of she basically just steals materia when she's younger, but she's kind of the goofy, let's jump in and fight everybody kind of style. And Ezra started out kind of that way, but obviously has, learned a lot since then. So I think seeing them together and kind of her being there through his growth through Rebels, I think would be really interesting.
I could see that. She could be like a nice comparable character to him.
Yeah, exactly.
So finally, Matt, what are the similarities between Star Wars and Final Fantasy? Any crossovers, parallels that you've noticed?
Well, they both have, huge, I hate this word, but I'm going to use it anyways, epic storytelling, but...
What's wrong with storytelling?
Epic. It's epic! But I just feel like if you've ever played a Final Fantasy game, especially my favorites, which is 7, 8, 9, and 10, the opening cutscenes are always just like, holy crap! And it makes you want to play the whole game just by watching the opening cutscene. And I feel like that's the opening cutscene for a Final Fantasy game is like watching a Star Wars trailer, where you're just like, oh my god, I want that now. And also there's a lot of parallels, I think, between the use of magic in those games to the way the Force is in Star Wars.
Excellent. That makes perfect sense. Because basically the Force is magic. I mean, it's a space fantasy and they didn't want to call it magic, so they called it the Force. But
right. They explained it, but I mean, if you in our world, it's magic.
Yeah, true. Microscopic organism magic. Anyway, Matt doesn't really do social media, so you can follow him on Twitter, but he doesn't post.
That's true.
So, thanks for coming on the show, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Blast.
Nice.
Hey, this is Robin Vogt of the BrickCityBlockade.com podcast network, and you are listening to Hyperspace PodBlast, the Star Wars podcast that's a lot more fun than a barrel of Ewoks. Here are your hosts, Brian and Shelby.
Howdy, partners. Welcome back into the Rapid Fire Fandom Friday.
Ooh, woof. Rough.
Okay, well, fine. They can't all be winners.
They can't all be rangers.
Zing.
Ooh, so who do we have today, Brian?
We have Tristan from the Canto Cast. How you doing, man?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for having me on.
Hey, it's our pleasure. And what are we talking about alongside Star Wars today?
Blade Runner.
Woohoo! I tell you what, aside from that Last Jedi film that came out last year, I think the new Blade Runner movie might be my favorite.
It was a really good movie.
Right on. So, segueing right into it, why do you love Blade Runner and how does it compare to your love of Star Wars?
I really love Blade Runner because of the story and the really kind of deep human themes it explores, talking about what counts as human and what doesn't, and kind of a dystopian future where machine has become, in some cases, like we saw with a lot of the replicants, more advanced than man has, and what the future kind of holds for the progress of humanity and the kind of the course that human nature takes when they treat each other and treat things that can replicate humans. So from that aspect, I really like it, and I also really love the the soundtracks in both movies. Vangelis and Hans Zimmer, both the movies did awesome. And of course, cinematography is, just super special and really, really neat to see. And comparing that to Star Wars, I really almost like more of the mystery behind it. And, the mystery of the Force, all these different things that the Force can do, kind of has that almost more of like a fantasy aspect to it. Whereas, to me, Blade Runner seems a little bit more of like a hardcore sci-fi type of film. So just kind of different genres almost, even though I guess they're both kind of similar in certain aspects, but just the genres and what each of them really kind of focuses on is like the biggest difference I noticed between the two.
So, Tristan, take 3 characters from Blade Runner. Who would they be in Star Wars?
Well, I'm actually going to do a little bit of a confusing of a mashup here, but I'm going to take Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, and I would almost put him in as Luke Skywalker, just because he's kind of the main protagonist, of course, and he's really the one that's going through this life-changing experience, and his past is, kind of unknown, and there's this kind of huge controversy surrounding, Luke's the last Jedi, but is Deckard a replicant? So I would almost feel like they kind of have that intertwined kind of, I guess you could almost say coming of age, but really just kind of like that same connection of, they're really kind of trying to figure out, their path in like the world that has been, kind of created around them. So I would put those two together. And then I would have to go with the main protagonist of 2049, Kay. I would kind of have to put him with almost like a Han Solo role, I would say. Again, going from Ryan Gosling to Harrison Ford. There is a lot of similarities, I guess, I feel like, between the two. They both kind of rely on themselves, you could say, or very few people. They're both, Deckard, of course, like he's working for, LAPD, and he's supposed to be like the super, clean guy, but he's, he kind of, in a lot of the scenes too, he also seems like this really grimy kind of, by, the grit of his teeth gets through it, just like Han Solo does. And then I think I'm also going to take another character from 2049, which is Joy, and I think I would put her possibly in Padme's role. It's kind of interesting to think, okay, well, Joy is just technically a hologram, right? So replacing her with a real person is would seem weird, but you really think of just how human Joy is and how she kind of had this, passion for people like Padme did. It really just kind of eerily lines up to me about just how humane Joy was. And when I think of like a diplomatic kind of, person that can really read others well, it comes, I think I would have to put her in Padme's role for that.
Yeah, I find it hard to remember that Joy wasn't a real person while I watched that movie, to tell you the truth.
Know.
Yeah, no, it's scary. Yeah,
it was done really well.
And her desire to do what is right and what is for the greater good.
Right.
I think that lines up with Padme. Yes, I agree.
Totally.
Definitely.
So now, if you could take one person from Blade Runner and actually put them into the Star Wars universe, who would it be and where would you put them?
I would actually really, really like to see Wallace, or someone from either Wallace or Love. I think I'll have to go with Wallace, just because he's kind of like another manipulator, just like Palpatine was, but having someone, that is just almost in Palpatine, willing to go to any extreme, and he saw kind of the potential that these replicants from Tyrell, I believe is how you properly pronounce the company, had, and really turned it into his own empire, where he had, and made all this money and had all this power. I'd really like to see Wallace kind of go at it with someone in the Star Wars universe, and I'd really like to see him kind of how he would react to having like a full galaxy's potential to dominate, really. So I think that'd be a really cool aspect to see.
Man, imagine Palpatine's clone army versus his replicant army.
Oh, I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Insane. Yeah, that would be an interesting juxtaposition, like the mystical manipulator versus the science manipulator, so to speak.
Yeah, just almost like religion versus science, quite literally.
Yeah, sort of.
In that sense.
And vice versa.
Ooh, if I took a Star Wars character and put it in, I would almost have to say it would have to be like a Jedi. It would have to be like Anakin or Luke. Just someone that could use that power. Like the replicants wouldn't know what to do if say for Luke Skywalker was a Blade Runner. Just with the lightsaber and Force powers going around, just crushing replicants, slicing through them. It would kind of be a pretty cool showdown, I think. So, but then again, it'd really be really cool to see like Darth Vader. And I know I'm doing more than one character, but seeing Darth Vader like just force choke a replicant would it would be quite an interesting match.
It'd be interesting too if you put any sort of Jedi, because if you think of it as if they had that experience of the clones turning on them.
Yeah, I don't think
yeah.
Like if you can take both experiences, you know what I mean? Like somehow put them into that universe and they still keep all of those memories.
Yeah, they would probably not like engineered people or slash not people.
Yeah, exactly. they wouldn't fall for the same mistake twice, I don't think.
Or
Yeah.
if you take them pre-Order 66 and put them into the Blade Runner universe, they would probably be defending them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. They would probably side for. Though I don't know, man. Would they see him as people? This goes back to what you were saying about the whole theme of Blade Runner in general. Man, too much to talk about. So anyway, if you could ship one character from Blade Runner and one character from Star Wars, what would that relationship be like?
I think, and again, this goes back to the really weird theme of like shipping someone like Joy, right? Someone who isn't even, it's a hologram, and like shipping her with, honestly, someone like Han Solo. I don't know. I just feel like it'd be a really interesting relationship, and it'd be really hard to kind of get that concept, see it in Star Wars of okay, this person isn't human, but can I still have that sort of relationship with him? So I think it would be the relationship may be awkward at times, but ultimately I feel like something would work out like it eventually did with I don't want to spoil anything, but with how it ended with Joy and Deckard there closer to the final act of the movie. But I'd really like to see, I guess, Joy and Han Solo would be quite an interesting relationship to see.
I am now picturing a Millennium Falcon AI.
That's exactly what I was thinking. And it's also interesting with the idea that people communicate through holograms in Star Wars. So whenever you're conversing with someone via hologram, what's the difference between that and just a hologram itself?
Right, yeah, that is I didn't even think about that. It's really interesting.
Anyway, last but not least, what are the similarities between Star Wars and Blade Runner as far as thematic parallels, crossovers, aside from both starring Harrison Ford?
I think that, of course, Blade Runner takes a much more quite literally earthy, more human, future dystopian type look at it. And Star Wars almost takes, at a galaxy, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's almost telling this completely different story that has nothing related to people on Earth, in a sense. So I think the biggest difference is Blade Runner says, oh, this is what it could be like, here in the future, and this is what the progress that humanity could take. But Star Wars almost tells a story, which I don't want to say if like a character itself, because of course we get these really, really in-depth Blade Runner character development stories, but Star Wars focuses more like on a mystery lore aspect of, oh, here's the Force, this is what happens when it affects someone, and it kind of takes a more of a fantasy approach to it than Blade Runner does.
Yeah, I think that's true. They often get lumped into that same category, but
science fiction and science fantasy are very different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast today, Tristan. Where can people go to find more about you?
They can actually check out my very own podcast, the Canto Cast. We do usually about half the shows Star Wars, the other half is just wherever the conversation leads us. But the Canto Cast, it's hosted by Jeffrey Fishbach and I, and it's a really, really fun podcast we have. So if you guys want to check that out and hear my opinion on different things, that is a great way to find me.
Yeah, and absolutely. If you listen to the intro, you might hear some familiar voices.
Oh, true.
Anyway, yes. Thanks again, Tristan. We'll talk to you later.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, bye. Welcome, ladies and
up,
gentlemen, to the Hyperspace
PodBlast
Rapid Fire Fandom Fridays. And coming up to the plate today, a man who needs no introduction, but is getting one anyway.
How good of a guy
Robin!
Hey, we should start a podcast that covers all of these things. Oh wait, we did.
Check out the Skyhoppers podcast every Friday at 8 a.m. wherever you get your podcast. guests.
Well, now that
You know
you've taken up
C-3PO and
the
R2-D2?
whole time
Kinda
for
like
this interview.
Yeah, but think of us
Yep.
more like
And that's all we have
the
time
T1B
for
and
today.
R5D.
Thanks for everyone. Thanks for coming.
So we have Robin Vogt here from the Brick City Blockade podcast. What's
Hey guys,
up?
hey, you know what? It's so exciting. I see everything happening with Hyperspace PodBlast across Twitter, across social media. Love listening to you guys. It's an absolute honor to be on here.
Aw, thanks. Now I'm blushing.
So what are we talking about today? Star Wars and?
Oh, Star Wars, and let's see. Well, I guch fandom, which is surrounding my love for baseball.
Very
Right
cool.
on.
If you couldn't tell from the intro.
Yeah.
So Robin, why do you love baseball and how does it compare to your love of Star Wars?
Oh man, baseball is one of those things that, growing up, of course, I grew up in southwestern Connecticut, so I was a New York Mets fan. I didn't go to the dark side and go to the Yankees. And compared to my love of Star Wars, you know what? It's up there. It's almost right next to it. I am diehard. I watch all the games that I can, and I watch as much Star Wars as I can. So it's almost equal, but I like to take a little bit of Star Wars over it at the same time.
Okay, so if you could take three, I guess we usually say characters, but I suppose they're players from baseball, who would they be in Star Wars?
All right, so if I were going to take three iconic baseball players, probably more recently, and put them into Star Wars, okay, number one is Giancarlo Stanton. Of course, he's now part of the Dark Empire New York Yankees. I would throw him in there as Chewbacca because he's got the strength and everything. Number two, I would take Mr. Noah Syndergaard with the long hair. I'd give him the role of Han Solo. And number three, I think I would take my own New York Mets, Mr. Jose Reyes, and I'd make him R2-D2 because that boy is fast. He knows how to run around the bases, and he can also get himself out of tricky situations like R2-D2 himself.
Saves
Absolutely.
the day.
Yeah, I was going to say, if your
Exactly.
team actually had an R2, I don't think they would ever lose a game.
So true.
So, if you could take one person from baseball and just drop them into Star Wars somewhere, who would it be and where would you put them?
I'm going to go back in time. I'm going to take Babe Ruth, and I'm going to throw him in his Jabba the Hutt because, listen, and it's not because of his size, but it's because he is like the powerhouse of baseball. He's the Bambino. You know, Jabba the Hutt was the Bambino of Star Wars. And he knew how to work his way around smugglers and get what he wanted, just like Babe Ruth in that original home run record. So I think that's who I would slip into the Star Wars universe from baseball.
You know what? I think Babe Ruth would actually make a really rad Star Wars character.
Just as himself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, powing around. I could see him hanging out with like Hondo and people of that.
Lando
credo.
and Babe
Yeah.
Ruth would be buds.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Interesting combo.
That would be hilarious. All right, so vice versa. If you could take someone from Star Wars and put them into baseball, who would that be?
Oh man. Let's with the upcoming Han Solo film. Let's take Han Solo. Let's put him out in the outfield and center field because he's in the clutch. He knows how to make those diving catches. He can take the Falcon. I mean, I can just picture it right now. Han Solo swooping in on the Millennium Falcon, reaching that glove out the window with Chewbacca and making the catch. So I think that's who I'd have to go with in that case. And let's put him with Terry Francona and Tarkin on the Cleveland Indians.
All right, go Cleve. The Cleve. All right, now this will be a weird one, I think, maybe, but we'll see what happens. Now, ship one character or player from baseball and one character from Star Wars. What kind of relationship would that be like?
Oh, that's interesting. So let's take Mr. Supreme Leader Snoke, all right? Because I feel like that guy needs some background story that we didn't get. And let's also take Mr. Alex Rodriguez himself, and let's get that going because I feel like that relationship. I mean, you think that Kylo Ren and Supreme Leader Snoke had it going down for the First Order. You put A-Rod and you put the powerhouse that he was, even though, of course, he injected himself with stuff, but at the same time, it's one of those things where you put Snoke and A-Rod together. I think that it would be a dynamic where one was trying to get over the other, but at the same time, they could run the First Order like it's supposed to be run.
Yeah, I think A-Rod would be an interesting replacement for Kylo Ren.
Well, at least you can tell him to take the stupid mask off.
I wonder what the relationship would be with Hux then.
Ooh, well, Hux is kind of the Derek Jeter, I guess. He's kind of off to the side. You know, he does what he needs to do for the First Order, and he's got to run the show at the same time. So, listen, Hux is in my Hall of Fame. If you were talking about like Cooperstown, he's in my Cooperstown.
Nice. I wonder where Cooperstown is in Star Wars. What planet do you think that would be? Hopefully not Alderaan.
Yeah, no, I don't think it would be Alderaan in that case. I don't know. I guess you could kind of go into Legends. You could go to the original Korriban and maybe make that the Cooperstown of the Sith Lords, or kind of throw that in there.
That would work. Nice. All right. And finally, what similarities can you find between Star Wars and baseball? Any sort of crossovers, parallels, or anything of that nature?
Well, number one, the Force is strong in both of them. The ability to hit a baseball out of the park, you have to be pretty strong in the Force to be able to do that. And I guess that's kind of pun intended because of the pitcher using centrifugal force and whatever amount of force to get the baseball through. Don't want to get too technical. People want, they've probably already turned this off with me on it by now. But at the same time, I feel like there is a nice balance between Star Wars and baseball in terms of the amount of power that these players have. You look at an Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's balanced. He's got immense strength in the Force, and he knows how to get himself out of situations. And baseball players do the same thing. They get themselves to the bottom of the ninth. They have to make the clutch move, or even the bottom of the eighth to set up that reliever. They find a way to do it. So that's kind of where it is. And I think that as fans of baseball and as a Star Wars fan, we kind of watch the game and we're kind of like turning our rally caps in and we're like, use the Force, New York Mets, use the Force.
That's amazing.
I'm not a baseball fan myself, but I always think about baseball being super stat heavy, and I'm thinking about that in relation to what would these baseball players' midichlorian count be, and the idea of Jedi obsessing over that number versus, say, baseball stats and things like that.
Well, I think that the problem with that is that, suddenly Major League Baseball is going to see people stabbing themselves with these midichlorian readings and they say, oh, we're going to ban them. We're going to get them out of here. No midichlorians in the game.
Start blood doping with midichlorians.
Exactly.
All right, Robin, thanks so much for being on the podcast today. Where can people go to find more about you?
Oh, well, everybody can head on over to Twitter and follow me at the official vote. Actually, that's my Instagram. See, this is funny because everybody is so used to me saying plug time and I didn't do it that time. But they can head on over to Twitter. They can follow me at Mr. Vote Tweets. Head on over to Instagram. Follow me there. Also, make sure to head on over to Facebook, friend request me so you can see all my tomfoolery on social media. Also, please make sure to head on over to www.brickcityblockade.com for everything happening in Galaxy Far, Far Away. Loving the support of Hyperspace PodBlast, sharing out all their stuff. So thank you guys so much. You can find me across all those places.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely check out their podcast network. They have a lot of great stuff going on there. So, yeah, man.
Talk to you later, dude.
Awesome conversation. Peace out.
Bye.